as an art, a full-time reservist, working full-time Monday through Friday and the weekend, they call it weekend warrior, traditional reservist as well. I did that for 9 years, and then I left the art program, the Air Reserve Technician program, and I came to DCMA as a full-time civilian, but I stayed in the reserves as a traditional weekend reservist. I did that for about 10 years, and just retired in July of 2010. Yeah, it was. Go ahead.
And sorry, and the war in which you served was.
Well, the war. Let's see. While I was active duty, I served for Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
Okay.
That's why my 4-year enlistment was extended for 8 months. There's a story to that. And then after that, I came to Westover, Massachusetts, and I was activated for Enduring Freedom, and activated again for Iraqi Freedom. So we had. And then we just another 6-month activation for the Afghanistan surge. So I was active duty for the first one, and then activated 3 times for Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, and the Afghanistan surge. Yeah, 3 separate activations. That was interesting.
And what was your highest rank?
I retired as a Master Sergeant in E7. I would have had E8 if I stayed in, but it was the right time to retire.
Yeah, after all that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you enlist?
I was enlisted. Yeah.
And where were you living at the time?
Well, at which time?
When you enlisted originally.
When I first went in the Air Force, I went in right out of high school. Right out of high school, it was a couple months, so I went into the military, and that was how I left home after graduating high school. And yeah, I was in East Hartford, Connecticut.
And why did you join?
Well, pretty good question. My brother Harry was also in the Air Force. He was over in the Philippines and at Andrews Air Force Base in DC. And so I basically followed his footsteps when I went in. I didn't know, I was unsure what to do and not certain. The Air Force always seemed kind of neat, and I took the ASVAB 3 times in high school.
What is that?
The ASVAB is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. It's a test. It's a test that evaluates your strengths. There's 4 categories it's scored: administrative, math, mechanics, and administrative. There's 4 different categories they score you in. And I scored high on mechanics and a couple of them. So they put me in. The recruiter actually told me he was gonna give me whatever I wanted. You're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. I loved welding. When I was in high school, I absolutely loved to weld. So he's like, you're gonna be a welder, and you're gonna be in Connecticut, and which was impossible. Mm-hmm. And so he put me in open mechanical, which I never knew at the time. So I found out in basic training, and when you graduate basic training, they tell you where you're going, what your job is. And I found out, I'm going to be a painter. At first, they were going to make me a painter, and I was miserable. I was hating it. So they sent me to School of Shepherd in Texas to be a painter, to learn all about corrosion control, all about how to paint planes and this and that and the other thing. I was so miserable with learning a job that I had no interest in, that you have a block test. My very first block test, I scored a 60, and you need a 60 to pass it. So after that, I was like, I had to take it serious. So after that, I applied myself, and I was getting 80s, 90s, and all that for the rest of the school. But it was a hard transition because I didn't want to be a painter. So after I finally adapted and accepted the fact that that's what I'm going to have to do, towards the end of the school, when you're getting ready to graduate, is when you find out your orders on where you're going to be stationed. And you come in, and I find out I'm going to be at Minot Air Force Base, and I didn't know where that was. So I'm looking on the map and looking in Connecticut, and I don't see it. And then I start looking at the bottom of the map in Texas, and I start going left to right, trying to find where this place of Minot Air Force Base is. It's in North Dakota, in the very top middle of the country. I had no idea. Everyone's laughing, you're going to Minot. I was miserable. I almost got out of it. I was willing to pay a guy $500 to swap orders with me because he was going to California. And he almost did it, but at the last minute he backed out. So I ended up going to Minot, North Dakota for my entire enlistment. I never went TDY. I never left that state other than to come home for vacation once a year. And I went to Canada and just driving around vacation things. But my whole active duty enlistment was in Minot, North Dakota, home with 100 below wind chill.
For that first time?
For the first part of my military career, which was 4 years and 8 months. And then, and it's kind of funny because I never went TDY anywhere until I got out of active duty and went to Westover. And then I went to a whole bunch of different places to fix planes. See, one of the things that happened while I was active duty is the aircraft maintenance, they merged two career fields. They took structural maintenance people it was airframe people and painters, and they put them together and made structural maintenance. Well, structural maintenance, out of 44 people, they asked, well, who wants to go learn sheet metal first? And raised my hand, me and another guy named Pete, who were the only two that volunteered to go from painting to structural. And it was great because everyone had to do it anyways. Mm-hmm. It was an excellent thing because I got out of painting and I started using my hands. Yeah. But it was good. It was good I learned how to paint because I painted about a dozen cars. I painted my Corvette, I painted my race car, I painted all sorts of people's cars because I knew how to do it. So it was actually a good skill to learn by going through that. But it was horrible just at the time. But anyways, after getting into structural maintenance, I did that for the last 3 years or so, 3.5 years of my active duty time. So I was only a painter for about a year. And then structural maintenance, the rest on B-52s and 135s. But what was I going to say? I'm losing my train of thought.
Okay, so backing up, after that, do you recall your first days in service?
My first day or days?
First day, days.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
You want to tell me?
Well, when I remember going through the MEP Center in Springfield, that was just, everyone goes through that. Everyone processes in and all that. You go away for basic training. And I remember, just to reflect real quick, I remember when my brother Harry had left to go in the Air Force. I was still in high school. And he came upstairs, he shook my hand, and because I had to get up for school, and I always like to kind of lay around in bed before getting up for school. I just wait. And my brother come up and says, Pat, I love you, but I'm leaving. I'm going to the Air Force. I'll see you later. And I told Mom I'd get you out of bed. So he shook my hand and he dragged me out of the bed and dragged me halfway down the stairs in my underwear. That was the day he left to go to the Air Force. Yeah, and it was. I just laughed. It was very funny. I'll keep that with me forever. But yeah, it was pretty neat. But again, when I went in, the same thing that they do. You get off the bus, after you fly down into Texas, you get on the bus, from the airport, and they bring you down to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, and they start yelling at you as soon as you get off the bus. They're screaming and yelling at you. And put your bags down, pick them up, put them down, pick them up. I told you to put your bag down. Why are you putting your bag down? I said pick it up. I mean, they're yelling and screaming at you. And then you had about 60 seconds to eat your first meal, which I don't remember what it was. It was horrible. It was like a ricey thing. But 60 seconds. And they're yelling and screaming at you, and you're inhaling this, and then boom, they start processing you. But the friends you make, though, I made a lot of good friends in basic training, too. And like Joe Mesterhazy, I went out and saw him. He was out in New York. But it was kind of neat because you grow up quick. You learn how to be there for each other. And so after, at the end of basic training, like I said, you're going to be a painter, ha ha ha. So then I went to Texas for school, and I went from Texas to Minot, North Dakota. And but the friends that you make, like I reflect about my buddy Fred Gardner. He and I both retired together this past July in 2010, and 2011. And I met him in North Dakota as a one-striper back in 1987, I think it was. And we've been friends our whole military career and our whole career. Now, Fred, you're going to interview later. He also works with DCMA now. He's a program integrator. He was in quality. He and I'm going to say this story because this story is very well worth it. Since Fred and I were such good friends in North Dakota, active duty, I could sit here and tell you all sorts of stories of fun things. I borrowed his car. I seized his engine in his car because it had no oil in it, and I didn't know. So we took his car back, and he actually took the head off the car. He whittled a piece of wood, the shape of the cylinders, smashed the cylinder. He took the head off and started smashing the pistons in the firing order. Put all sorts of oil on it and smash, and he broke the welded pistons, and he unseized the engine, which is never ever heard of. You can't unseize an engine; it's destroyed. He unseized it, put the same head gasket on, put it together, started up, and it ran fine. Couldn't believe it. So, and then working on his car, I put he had to go back to the shop. So he had a bad oil pump, so I put the whole thing back together for his other car, sealed everything, put it in. He comes back. I'm like, Fred, I got it all done for you. He goes, yeah, well, I forgot to put the oil pump in. So I had to take the whole thing apart and put it back together. But the thing with Fred is that Fred and I were such good friends in North Dakota. He stayed active duty for about 12 years or so. And then he came to Westover. He called me up and says, Pat, I need a job. I'm getting out of the Air Force. And what happened was his father-in-law became terminally ill. So he told his boss, this is Luke Air Force Base while he's active, he says, listen, boss, I need to go home for about a month or so. Family, my father-in-law is terminally ill, has cancer and all that. And his boss says, no, too bad. It's not your direct father, it's your father-in-law, so we're not going to let you. And by the way, we're putting you in charge on night shift. You're going to Graves. So Fred, he said, well, I'll be right back. He went to personnel, took his paperwork, threw his paperwork at the lady. He says, listen, I've got 80 days, I think it was 80 days of leave saved up. I'm supposed to re-enlist in 2 months. I'm not re-enlisting. Put me on terminal leave. They're like, no problem, Sergeant Gardner, here you go. So he went back to the shop chief, says, here you go, here's my paperwork, I'm getting out. Oh, no, we can work with you. He says, no, you can't work with me. I'm about integrity. That's what he told him. So he left, he called me up, I need a job, bam. Got him a job at Westover working on a field maintenance team, was working on floor panels. And so Fred came over there. He worked there for about a year or so, year and a half, between Lockheed and Raytheon. And then it took about a year and a half or so. Then we got him an art job, working with me in the shop as an Air Reserve technician, as a full-timer. So he and I, we just picked right up. We worked together a whole time there as in structural maintenance at Westover. He did that for about a year, and year or two at Westover, and that's when the DCMA opportunities came up. And Fred and I told him, Fred, look, this internship, this intern position, it's an opportunity. You walk in the doors of GS7 in quality, and then a year later make a 9, a year later make your 11. It's a great opportunity. Let's put in for it. Yeah, I'll get to it. I'll do it. I'll get to it. So he kept putting it off and putting it off. I said, listen, Fred, I need you to come over. My car's broken. I need some help. Can you help me? Oh, I'll be there any minute. He comes right over. I said, good. Now sit your butt down. We're doing your resume. We're putting all the paperwork. We're going to apply for these together. Okay. So for 4.5 hours, we did all of our packages, and we mailed all our stuff in and applied together. Well, there's more to the story. It's even better. A couple months later, this is back when it was all paper. A couple months later, we get a phone call. We're going to have an interview, a phone interview. So Fred's going to be at 6 o'clock. I'm going to be at 6:30. Well, the day of the interview, it was snowing, a huge snowstorm, and they called Fred an hour early. They called him from California. There's 3 or 4 people in a room. They called him and said, Mr. Gardner, we're ahead of schedule. Do you mind if we interview you now? He said, well, he was out there shoveling the driveway, and he's sweating. He said, well, you kind of caught me off guard, but of course you can. I'm not going to say no. So he starts going through the interview, and he's not doing well. He's bombing it out. He's not prepared now, and they caught him off guard, and they said, well, what's your greatest strength? Communication, So he didn't do very well. So at the end of his interview, the board says, well, do you have any questions for the board? He says, well, as a matter of fact, I do. He says, I don't feel I did too well on this interview, but, if you elect not to hire me, let me recommend an individual you should really think about. His name is Pat Cassidy, and let me tell you about Pat. He starts going on for 10 minutes. He's talking about how wonderful I am. And I didn't know, the thing is, I didn't know he did that. I had no idea. So after they hang up with him, about 15 minutes later, they call me up. And I'm sitting there, I've got all the lights off, I got candles lit, my questions and answers are laid out, I prepared I'm waiting for the phone. The phone rings, I'm like, hello. And so they start asking me these questions, and I'm banging them out. I'm prepared for this, I'm ready, I'm started doing great on questions. At the very end, they asked me, well, Mr. Cassidy, do you have any questions for the board? I says, as a matter of fact, I do. He says, if you elect not to hire me, let me recommend a person that would be a great asset to your organization. His name is Fred Gardner. And let me tell you about Fred. We're like a well-oiled machine together. His strengths are my weaknesses and vice versa. And I went on and on how awesome Fred was. And they hired both of us. Now, the funny part was that literally 10 or 15 seconds after I hung up the phone, I lost power and I lost phone from the snowstorm. Yeah, so Fred and I both got hired. We both went in as interns, and we were hired. March 25th, 2001 was our first day, and we were in East Hartford, and then we went down to Middletown together for a while. Yeah, it was pretty good. So, and to this day, Fred and I are still pals. He just recently made his 12. I've been at 12 for about 3 years. He's a PI. He left quality to become a program integrator, and I think he's going to come back into quality eventually. But we're still pals. So our military retirement, we retired together. After it was 10 years ago, we had left the Air Reserve program and came into DCMA together. But we're still reservists. We're still doing the weekend thing, and we both got activated first time. Both got activated second time. He wasn't activated the third time because he had a broken foot, and but I was activated the third time. And we've been pals our whole military career. So that's something that's, to me, that's a lifetime. That's something I keep with me, that I will keep. I see Fred all the time. Yeah.
Jumping back to basic.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn in basic?
Well, you teach about teamwork. Teamwork is that's the number one thing in basic training. You have to learn to rely on other people and know that other people can rely on you to do what needs to get done. And it wasn't like that instantly. It wasn't like that at all. There were a lot of conflicts and issues and all of that stuff. But you work it out. Fear is a good motivator. For a while, recently, for a little while in basic training, they had this nonsense with time out. The recruiter, the recruitee, the person getting trained, could tell the drill instructor who's yelling and screaming, "Oh, time out! I'm stressed out," and they'd have to stop. It's insane. But they did that for like a year or two, and then they realized that there's no reason to go to basic training if they're not going to learn anything like that, So they eliminated that. I couldn't believe that though when they originally did that.
So what did they have you do in basic to kind of learn the communication?
Well, every single day you would run, first thing in the morning, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. I think it was 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't remember. It was early in the morning before sun come up. You have to fly downstairs and get in formation for the TI, the training instructor, the drill instructor. So we're all staying in formation. Then we'd go upstairs. We'd have to get ready, clean up, make your bed, clean everything, shower, all the regular stuff. Fold everything, get everything perfect. Go to breakfast. You'd go to breakfast, and after breakfast, you come back. You'd change into your PT, your physical training gear, and then you go run. Now you wouldn't just run. The formation as a whole formation the squadron would run in uniform as a square, basically a big giant square running down into this track. Well, for the first week, you had to do a quarter of a mile, which is no big deal, because at the end of basic training, you have to run 1.5 miles within a certain amount of time. And the PT, you did everything: push-ups, sit-ups, stretches, all your physical exercises, and running. Well, your run, everyone in formation to run a quarter mile. It's different. Everyone's out of step and tripping and hitting and all of that. It's pretty difficult. We ran a quarter of a mile every single day for a week, and you're in basic training for 6 weeks. The second week, you did a half a mile every single day. The next week, 3/4 of a mile. It went 1/4 mile increments. So everyone ran together every single day and got better and better and better at it. And they got conditioned. You get conditioned from doing it. We'd run in the morning and we'd run it at night. And so by the end of your 6 weeks, you're running 1.5 miles and it's a breeze. Well, I'll never forget though, there's the whole training thing is, well, all of this running is because you're going to be evaluated at the very end. There's going to be a test. You're going to run this 1.5 miles and it's going to be timed. So the big test, you know. So when we were doing our big 1.5 mile test, I'm running and a guy behind me stepped on my sneaker and took it off. So, and you don't break formation, you know, so I'm running with one sock and one sneaker. I'm running and you have to do so many laps going around. So I run that for a whole lap and then I'm coming up on my sneaker. So I grabbed my sneaker and I'm hopping and I put it on and I run back in formation. Yeah, I'll never forget that. Yeah.
Do you remember your instructors?
Yeah, Sergeant Barcroft and Sergeant Andres. Sergeant Andres was a staff sergeant, and Sergeant Barcroft was a tech, or it was tech and master, I can't remember. But Sergeant Andres was the one that did all the work. And I remember, Cassidy, he'd always call me Cassidy. Cup them hands, Cassidy. You know, when you're marching, he'd yell at me like it was nothing. Yeah, I remember that. Andres and Barcroft, my 2 TIs.
And how did you get through basic? How did you handle it?
Well, I was fine. A lot of guys would gravitate towards me to talk to because I can talk. I'm an extrovert. I'm a people person. So a lot of the guys who were going through a tougher time, you know, I'd sit and talk with them, and you kind of build that camaraderie, you know. So it was okay. It was just, you just did what you had to do. It was only 1.5 months long. You can't make you cry. Well, they can, but oh well, you can cry and get over it. You know, but for a young guy, when you're 18 years old and your eyes are big and wide, you know, it's pretty interesting. I went in basic training November 20th of 1986. And when I went in, let's see, 6 weeks long. Well, my birthday is in December. My parents' anniversary is in December. My sister's birthday is in December. Thanksgiving is November 26 or 24 at the time, 24. And New Year's, and let's see, and Christmas. So all of those holidays and birthdays and things like, I was in basic training. Yeah. Yeah, that was fun. Thanksgiving and Christmas in basic training.
Did they mark it in any way, or is it just as if it's not even happening? Because
they were a little easier. They were a little nicer. Thanksgiving, you got to have a decent meal. That was about it. Christmas, though, there was a quiet day. You know, you had a day for yourself, basically. And they didn't, yeah, they weren't going to beat you up on Christmas. Christmas present.
Okay, and from basic you went?
From basic training, I went to Shepherd Air Force Base for tech school, and that was for corrosion control, to learn how to paint. Which it's actually a good school because you learn about chemistry. But I went there, and that was only 6 weeks long. And after Shepherd, I went home for 2 weeks, and I went to Minot, North Dakota. And I was there my whole active duty enlistment.
Now, do you have any memorable experiences from Shepherd?
Not really a lot. It was just tech school. The thing with getting a 60 on my first block test, right. You know, it scared me into applying myself. Right. And then I took it serious, and that was about it. Really not a lot. You make some friends. Yeah.
And how about North Dakota?
Well, here's a good example. The friends that I made active duty, and there's I don't think anyone that you're going to ever interview will be able to say this. My first supervisor, her name was Carol Thorpe. She is currently still in the reserve. She's a senior master sergeant, and she drove 10 hours with her husband Jeff, who I also worked with in North Dakota. They drove together 10 hours just to come to the retirement, mine and Fred's retirement. My buddy Chris Gilbreth flew in to come to my retirement. Chris Gilbreth was another friend from active duty. My buddy Scott Reifenberg, he flew in from Indiana to come to the military retirement. And my buddy Mark Hansen, he was going to fly in, but he had personal family issues that stopped him from coming in to last minute. But these active duty friends that I made from North Dakota, you still stay friends with them, you know. And they all came in to share that retirement date. You know, that was huge. It was huge. We had about 80 people that came to that retirement for Fred and I. We had a tour to C5. We had 2 school buses full, and we had a catered thing, and I mean it was really a great day. Yeah. One of the things that we did at the ceremony, like I'm going to talk about my Sterling engine that Fred made for me, but I got Fred an eagle. It's a bronze eagle. It's a big giant bronze eagle clasping the American flag. And I had it engraved on the bottom with just one word and one word only. It said brothers, you know, and that's what I gave that to him at the retirement. But some of these things that I have here, I've got one more thing I should have brought in too, is I've got a biplane that Fred made for me for leaving Westover and going into the program. My Sterling engine for my retirement, my plaque with the B-52 and a 135 was from Fred and the people in the shop. They handmade this thing. Now the planes have the tail numbers of the actual last 2 planes that I physically worked on in North Dakota before I left active duty. And a funny story with that plaque is that plaque meant so much to me that when I left active duty and flew home, I had to fly home, and then I went back, and then I had to drive my car. Well, when I flew home, I carried that plaque. I didn't pack it because I didn't want anything to happen to it. Well, I'll never forget. The flight I had taken home had 3 different transfers, and I'm transferring plane to plane to plane. Well, at the very end, I went from New York to Bradley International, which is only like a 30-minute flight. So they put down this little tiny 2 prop job engine plane, little small plane. It sits like maybe 12 or 16 people. It's a very small plane. So I'm sitting there, and I took this plaque and I put it on the seat next to me. And there's only 2 seats, and there's one to the right, and it goes back. And there was a lady back there, a big lady that was sitting back there, seatbelted in, and we hit turbulence with that little tiny airplane. We hit turbulence so hard that my plaque hit the ceiling, and it stayed there for about 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and then it fell back down to the seat. That's the kind of turbulence. I looked over, looked at that big lady. She's clinging to her seatbelt. Her eyes were, oh my God, you know, the plane's going down. Scared the hell out of both of us. If I'll never forget that plaque hitting the ceiling and staying on that ceiling. I'm like, oh my God, you know, we're gonna die. And then it landed back on the seat. You know, unbelievable. You know, that lady was so petrified. I was too. Then the pilot, well, we hit a little bit of turbulence there, but we're okay now. Heart pounding on me. Yeah, that was quite the story. Yeah, that was leaving active duty, coming back home.
So, in North Dakota, doing the structural maintenance.
Yep.
Can you describe for me a typical day?
Sure. Let's see. We'd come in. We'd show up at work and have formation in the morning. And the shop chief will come out and give us all our assignments. Okay, Pat, you're going to go work on this plane. Yeah, Fred, you're working on that plane. Someone else, you're working on this. There's things that has to be done. So they tell you, here's your run. We'd take a list of all the things that are broken on the planes, and we'd go fix them. Small things, big things. There was one time I did a bird strike. There was a hole in the front of the wing about this big, just a complete hole. The plane was flying about 30,000 feet, and it hit an eagle. And the eagles and let's see, turkey vultures. There's a lot of turkey vultures, eagles. and some hawks. There was a lot of birds, but eagles were the only ones that could really fly up that high. So this B-52 lands and has this big old hole in the wing. And so that was my project. So you cut the whole thing out, and you make new aluminum ribs and pieces, and all of the stuff, rivet all together. Took a few days. Took a few days to do it. My buddy Fred, he's done more extensive projects than I ever did. They had one that was one that hit a B-52 to hit a flock of seagulls flying in, and it was seagulls. It was a flock of birds. Couldn't have been seagulls, but a flock of birds, and there were like 6 or 7 bird strikes on this plane. But one of them was so bad, it went through the front of the wing and cracked the actual fuel cell. The wings on airplanes are fuel cells, they're fuel tanks. And the front of this thing was cracked. The hit had hit so hard, which is unheard of. So they took that whole thing apart. I mean, so much work to do that. It took about a month and a half for them to fix that plane. But they did. I mean, the planes, the B-52s, they were designed in 1945, and they didn't start flying until the 50s. And I mean, think about it. It's designed in 45. This is the year 2012 or 2011, and they're still flying, and they're projected to fly until the year 2040. It's a 100-year aircraft. That's crazy. Yeah, the ones we worked on, the H models, they were built in the ones that we worked on were built in 1960 and 1961. Yeah.
And then, after North Dakota, where did you go?
I went to Westover Air Force Base. Now, when I went to Westover, that's in Chicopee, Mass. Like I mentioned before, I went in as an Air Reserve technician, a full-timer. But the story between active duty and going to Westover was, when you're active, when you come up on your 3-year, for a 4-year enlistment, when you come up to 3.5 years of your enlistment, you have to either cancel your CJR, which is your career job reservation, or you have to tell your boss that you intend on re-enlisting. They got to know so they can start recruiting for your slot when you leave. So 3 years and 3 months into my active duty enlistment, I set up another job. I was going to come to Connecticut working on the A-10s in the Air National Guard unit as a full-timer, wearing a uniform every day as a technician. So I set up a job, and they said, okay, we're going to hire you as soon as you get out, which is in 9 months. 9 months from now, you're getting out. Well, so that was at 3 years and 3 months. 3 months later, at my 3.5-year mark, they said, okay, Sergeant Cassidy, what are you going to do? Are you going to re-enlist, or are you going to get out? And I'm like, well, I'm going to get out, because I'm going to go to the Guard. Yeah, I've got a technician job waiting on me. They're going to hold it, and it's all set. So 3 months after that, at my 3-year and 9-month point in my 4-year term, we were put on stop loss for Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So stop loss means nobody can get out. We're going to extend you. So when I hit my 4-year mark, I was still on stop loss and I couldn't get out. So 3 months later, at my 4-year and 3-month mark, I talked with the people that were going to hire me, and they said, listen, Sergeant Cassidy, we have to fill this position because with Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we've held this job open for you now for a year. And since you can't get out yet, which I could have, I didn't know I could have, but I could have transferred into it. But since you can't get out, we have to fill the slot. And I said, listen, I absolutely understand. You guys go ahead. And so they went ahead and filled the slot. 2 months later, they told us, okay, Sergeant Cassidy, you can come off active duty now. We're going to let you go. Pick a date. So I put it as long as I could in order to try to find a new job, which I didn't at the time, which was July 30th of 1991. So I ended up staying active duty for an additional 8 months, which I lost a job in order to stay active duty. But Westover Air Force Base was actually Plan B. Yeah, it was actually Plan B, and I went there and talked with the shop chief and asked if they're hiring. He said, yes, we are, as a matter of fact. So he interviewed me on the spot, and he says, well, He told me he would get me in. Now, when I got out of the Air Force, I was on unemployment. I could not find a job anywhere. So I was applying all over the place. Nobody was hiring in airframe. My unemployment was going to run out in 2 weeks. Is when they had hired me. I was nervous. I was 23 years old. I was very, very nervous. What am I going to do? And Westover hired me. So I took the art job, and I moved to Massachusetts for a year, and then I moved again later back down towards East Hartford. But yeah, Westover was Plan B, and I ended up staying there for a long time. Let's see, my first official day was January 27th, 1992. But the funny part is, a week before that, when I went there to be hired and I interviewed and all of that, on the way home, they said, okay, you're going to start next week. We'll have you in here, and then we'll get your process and reserves and all of that. So a week before that, when I was there for the interview, get all done, they said, we're going to hire you. It's time to go home. Well, I got my dad's car, and I'm driving home, and I'm lost. I'm trying to find my way out. I've never been up to Massachusetts before. Massachusetts has street lights that are on the side. They're not hanging over the street. They're off to the side. Yeah. So I'm driving. I'm like, hey, that lady's going to cut me off. Smash. I totaled my dad's car. I drove right through an intersection. Didn't even see the stop sign. There's no stoplight there. I drove right through. Got in a car accident the day that they hired me at Westover because I was lost trying to find my way home. I was absolutely hating it. Yeah, so then a week later I started my new job and took it from there.
And what was a typical day at Westover?
Well, pretty much the same as active duty, except for you're not in uniform, you're in civilian clothes, and you're working on C5s. Working on C5s instead. Here's your assignments, and we have stuff. We'd inspect planes, we'd fix them. But over the time that I was at Westover, you go farther from working with your hands, and the longer you were there, you would go more into a more management aspect. But you're still working. You're still working with your hands, but now you take on more responsibilities. Fred and I both became Red X qualified, which means we have the authority to go out, and if a plane has been Red X, they put a Red X in the aircraft forms. The pilots, when they go to fly, the first thing you do is look at the aircraft forms. If there's any Red X's anywhere, the plane can't fly. It's grounded. We could go up there and sign off that Red X and say, it's okay, it's been fixed, and it's been fixed right. You don't do that for the first few years that you're in anywhere. You have to learn the technical aspect. You have to get good at your job in order to get on Red X orders. Yeah. It was one of the million things we did over there.
So then, from Westover, when were you reactivated?
Well, let's see. With Westover, I can talk about a bunch of things. In 2000, let me think, 2001, we were activated for Enduring Freedom to 2002. In 2003 to 2004, we were activated for Iraqi freedom, and in 2010, I was activated for 6 months for the Afghanistan surge. Let me see here. There was something I was going to mention. I lost my train of thought again. You lose your memory along with your sanity. Yeah, but Westover, I remember it. At Westover Air Force Base, I was one of the few people on the base that had been in positions that not many people have an opportunity to see. I told my boss I was going to apply to be on the AFA Reserve Council. This is very significant. The AFA Reserve Council, it's the Air Force Association Reserve Council, it's made up of anywhere between 12 and 18 people throughout the entire Air Force Reserve across the globe, the States. Any Air Force Reserve member would compete to be on this board. Now this board, what we do is we collectively get feedback from the people on the base and bring the feedback for questions on where do you think the Air Force should go. If Congress was going to spend money somewhere, what should they spend it on? Building new hangars, planes, recruiting, benefits. I mean, there's all sorts of things that money can be spent on for the military. And like MilCon was important, military construction was important. Well, the members of the AFA board would take the feedback and would board it and make 5 top recommendations to the Senate. And it would go through about a 32-layer process before it would reach the Senate and scrutinized and examined and checked and all sorts of things. But we would actually make the recommendations to the Senate on how to spend money in the Air Force Reserve Command. And I did that for 2 years. Every 3 months, I would go away for a week. I'd either go to the Pentagon, or I'd go to Florida, or I'd go to Colorado, and back to DC at Pentagon. We'd use that cycle and rotate it every 3 months for 2 years. They asked if I was going to stay on it again for another 2 years, and I elected to pass just to give someone else an opportunity. It was a great, great experience. I was able to meet some of our senior leaders. At one point, there was a function. There were 7 4-star generals there, and 2 of them knew me. General Ryan, who was the chief of staff at the time, knew me. Mike Ryan, and John Jumper was taking his place, and it was pretty cool knowing these senior leaders. So I was able to interface with them. Something that happened recently that I liked was I got a chance to meet General Petraeus, and General Petraeus, he was actually in Connecticut. So I went over and I brought my dad with me. We went in to see him. He was just coming in to do a speech. And so I went over and talked to security because I knew how they all work. After being on the council, you get to know people. So I talked with the security of the function. I said, listen, I have a coin that I'd like to give to the general from Westover. I'd like to give the general one of my Westover coins. And can we meet him? So they talked with the coordinators and the security, and the colonel come over and says, these guys are with me. So this colonel escorted me and my dad into the VIP area before the symposium, before the general came out to speak. And I got a chance to talk to General Petraeus for about 5-10 minutes. I mean, we talked and talked and talked. It was absolutely great. The man's full of integrity. I was very, very impressed with him. And so he shook my hand and said, well, let me thank you for your service. And he gave me a 4-star coin. And I said, I appreciate it. He said, this is great, and I'm up at Westover, and I'm in DCMA, went overseas. Oh, here's a coin. He said, yeah, I'm stationed at West. Well, here's another coin. He gave me a second 4-star coin, which I'm like, he said, you give that one to your colonel as a get out of jail free card. So what I did is I actually gave that coin to a retiring colonel that we had, Colonel Vrella. Someone I admired, and when he retired, I gave him that 4-star coin. But I still have mine. I actually have it in my collection here. But I used to collect them. I've had opportunities. I met General Magnus from the Marine Corps. He gave me a 4-star coin. General Mosley, when he was the chief of staff, he gave me a coin, and I let someone else use it, and it's gone. That one from General Sherrod, who was the 3-star for the Air Force Reserve Command, and a whole bunch of them. My little collection there. There's a lot of memories. Yeah, all the coins that generals gave me. It's pretty neat.
We'll get there.
Yeah, that's fine.
And okay, so we were talking about your different activations and what you did during the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first one?
Well, okay, let's talk about a couple of them. One thing I did, let's see, I'm going to try to put all of this together. When I was a full-timer at Westover, and I'm not activated yet, it didn't matter if I was or wasn't. One of the things I did was I started a school, a jiu-jitsu class. I've been training jiu-jitsu for almost 20 years now, and once I made my black belt, I started a class. That was in 1995. Actually, I got my belt in 95. I started Westover School Self-Defense in 96. It was March 20th. And so I started my class. My very first student was a lieutenant colonel. It was great. At one point, my class, it got so big that there was no room. I could put 30 people in the dojo in the room. And I had a list over 30 people long waiting to join the class. It was absolutely phenomenal, but it was just too many people. I couldn't, so we had to wait when people left and they moved on or whatever, then there would be positions that would open. I did that for 8 years. I taught, and during those 8 years of that class, I'd do it 2 hours twice a week. At first it was Tuesday, Thursday, it changed Monday, Wednesday, but it was for 2 hours twice a week, and I did that for 8 years at that place. It was great. Westover, the gym at Westover, they sponsored me with the facility. They got mats for me. They were very, very good. Jim Kelly was the guy. He's a retired chief. He was very, very good to me, helping it succeed, because it was a program for the base, which was for the people on the base. And so it was absolutely phenomenal. We've been to seminars. We competed nationally. We competed internationally. Students, everyone did good. 2 of my students became Navy SEALs. 2 of them. I had special forces in the class. I had not MPs, but security police, civilians, enlisted, officers, you name it. It was a mix of everything. It was really, really good. It was a big, big part of my life. But that was one thing during the activations at Westover that I was able to provide, because now all these people are on base. And what are they going to do? Westover doesn't have a lot of facilities. So I kept my class going.
Well, it serves as the recreation thing and keeping in shape.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Now I'll get to the Iraq part after, because I kept that over in Iraq too. But if you want to know, I'll tell you now.
We'll go in order.
Okay. So the activations, let's see. The funny part is the activations. The first activation at Westover was in 2001. Well, it was like 5 or 6 months after Fred and I were hired in DCMA. So we just left Westover for 5 or 6 months to start our new job as quality, as interns. And then we had called back to Westover to wear a uniform every day, activated again. Now we're here for the first time. It was for a year. And so at DCMA, our civilian job, we're on hold. It wasn't really hold. They didn't stop our promotions, but we weren't here. So we got hired. 6 months later, we're gone for a year. We came back after getting deactivated. Then 5 months later, they activated us again for Iraqi freedom, from enduring freedom, then Iraqi freedom. So we left our jobs again for another year, and then we came back. So out of the first 3 years that we were hired, we were only here for 6 months, or actually a year. They did maintain our employment. Absolutely. DCMA worked with us very, very respectably. I was very impressed. We didn't have to worry about losing our jobs.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was good too, because we're both making careers out of it. It was worth it. It was a career choice. It was great. But yeah, I'll never forget. We got hired and boom, we're gone back at Westover, working on planes. Yeah, and the deactivate back at Westover again, and then the third time for me, same thing, 6 months. Yeah.
Now, for each of those, was it the same working on?
Same environment. We worked on C5s, but on the second activation, we weren't. Fred and I weren't on the same shift. I ran my shift, and Fred was on his, and they sent us to Dover. We went down to Dover Air Force Base near DC for 2 months, couple months. It was a bad story too with that. It was before we left. My crew, there were we sent out of, I think it was about 40 people in our shop. We sent 20 of them down to Dover for the first 2 months, and then they were coming back, and in our 20 people were going to go. Well, in between there's a couple of days of transition, travel and all of that. I'll talk about that in a minute. But before we left, there were 2 people on my team in my shop that I did not want to go. I said, I do not recommend. I told my upper management, I said, I'm recommending you do not send these 2 people. One of them was incompetent, and the other one had an alcohol problem. And I mean, this guy came to me. He's like, Sergeant Cassidy, he goes, I have an alcohol problem and I need help. I said, I'm going to get you that help. So for once a week, I was going with this guy, driving out to Worcester, Massachusetts, and attending this alcohol counseling and awareness and trying to help this guy with his problem. And it was working. And then they throw a wrench in. Oh, got to leave, got to go deploy now for 2 months. So I said, don't send this guy. Leave him here. Keep him behind, working the skeleton crew until the new people, the other shift comes back. And they deployed him anyways. Him and the other guy. The incompetent one gave me it was a nightmare with him being down there. He gets in a car accident, he loses his government credit card, he loses his government credit card a second time. The list goes on and on and on. People are yelling at him because he's doing things wrong and no respect, and it was a mess. And it was embarrassing having that guy on my team. And then the other guy never came back for 8 months. He was MIA, missing in action. Nobody knew where he was. The MPs were looking for him. Everyone's searching, trying to find him, and he vanished. And then 8 months later, he showed up at Westover at the front gate. He says, "Hi, here's my ID card. I need to see a chaplain." And that was the right thing to do to prevent from getting a dishonorable discharge. I need help. Well, now we can't. He's asking for help, so they can't penalize him. So, he did get discharged and everything eventually, but I'm sure it was honorable. But it could have been avoided. But nope.
Well, if you ever made any further recommendations, I'm sure they would need it.
Yeah. I'm not proud that it made me.
Yeah.
It gave me clout, but stuff like that, I was not impressed. They just do what's right. So what's next?
Did you have anything else you wanted to say about the activation?
The activations, one little story, I guess. Like I mentioned, my buddy Fred, he's been nagging me after we first got hired. After we first got hired at DCMA, we got activated. I was living in Enfield, about a half an hour from the base, so I was commuting, and it was okay. Well, after we got deactivated and we're back, we started getting an inclination that we were going to be activated again because of Saddam Hussein and all the stuff with Iraqi freedom. And we had an idea. We kind of suspected it, and Fred kept saying, "Pat, you need to move. You need to move." At this time, I was working in Middletown and living in Enfield, which is about a 40-minute ride. And Fred and I were commuting. So I said, "Okay, Fred, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to move." So I moved to Middletown, where I worked, which was the closest town that was outside of the commute for Westover. So what happened was I moved to Middletown, and I put my box down, my very last box, the day I'm moving, all done. And then the next morning I got on a plane to go TDY for a week of school. DCMA sent me to school for something. And I came back, and as soon as the plane landed, I come back, I turned on my cell phone, and about 5 seconds after I turned it on, it rang. And it was the shop chief at Westover. "Pat, you're activated." So it took me 3 months to unpack my boxes at my new apartment. So while I was at Westover, now that I was at Westover, activated the second time for a year, they put me in a hotel because I was outside of the commute. Well, they put me at this hotel, which you could sign up for points. So I'm like, "Yeah, we can sign up for points." I'm there for a year. I had 200,000 points by the end of my activation. What can you get? And they went through the JAG's office and everything, and it was legal. So yeah, this is a benefit of the military for using our hotel. Well, what can you get with 200,000 points? A trip to Hawaii for a week at a 5-star resort. Well, what I did was I gave it to my mom and dad. My mom and dad had never been to Hawaii. I said, "You know what? Merry Christmas." I gave them a Christmas present. Send you to Hawaii for a week. And I paid to upgrade their airline tickets to first class. And we gave them a couple of $100 extra to go. So it was pretty cool.
That's very sweet.
It was neat. That was a good thing. I still haven't been to Hawaii yet. I haven't made it there yet.